woke comic book. The author who tried to end the world.
Jared again, and today we're talking about everyone's favorite drug-addled Gandalf, Alan Moore. Alan Moore has authored many of the most acclaimed comics of all time, including Watchmen, Miracle Man, and The Killing Joke. And like the Joker and Batman in that story, Moore straddles the thin line between genius and insanity.
I decided it might be more interesting to actually terrify them by going completely mad and declaring myself to be a magician.
He calls himself a ritual magician, not the kind that pulls rabbits from hats, but the Stephen Strange variety that consults grimoires and conjures demons. Seriously. At first glance, much of what Moore means by magic seems more like the superstitions of a man hitting his corncob wizard pipe a little too hard. But if we take Moore seriously for a bit, there's a pretty fascinating philosophy at play here. So what can we learn from a guy who claims he tried to end the world? Well, we're gonna have to dive into a little known and even less understood occult tradition known as Hermeticism. Welcome to this Wisecrack Edition on the philosophy.
What the f? My man's over here talking about ancient rituals, except he's been avoiding the most important ritual, which is taking a shower, dude. How about that ritual, brother? You want to do that? Good ritual to do, I think. Dude became a witch talk before witch talk existed.
Philosophy of Alan Moore. Today's topic is magic real? There's a ton more to cover, however, so if you want more, let us know in the comments. But first, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Hims, who allows men to...
Oh my god.
Hermeticism's goal is to seek understanding of the world through three methods: alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. The first two are familiar enough, but the third, theurgy, is basically the process of achieving spiritual perfection with the goal of growing ever nearer to God. Hermeticism is largely based on the teachings of the Corpus Hermeticum by the mythical Hermes Trismegistus. He's a mixture of Hermes and Thoth, the Greek and Egyptian gods of language and wisdom respectively. To Moore, this mixture of language and understanding is the heart of magic. In his upcoming The Moon and Serpent bumper book of magic, Moore defines magic as a purposeful engagement with the phenomena and possibilities of consciousness. So what the f does that mean? Essentially, Moore is saying that what we call reality can be broken up into two categories: the material and the immaterial. The material is all the physical stuff, matter and energy, space and time, fundamental forces, all that. But we never experience those things directly. Photons hit our retina, pressure waves impact our eardrums, those signals get sent to our brains, and based on that limited sensory information, the brain makes a mental model of what it perceives the external world to be like. That mental model is the immaterial. To understand how the material and immaterial affect each other in profound ways, let's think of Watchmen. Moore had an ephemeral idea in his head for the story, but it wasn't until artist Dave Gibbons gave the idea form by penciling in those panels that it achieved a form. Moore's intangible thought had a tangible effect on the arrangement of the atoms that became Watchmen. The opposite is true as well. You're picturing in your mind's eye Dr. Manhattan's statuesque and uncensored azure phallus, for no other reason than because I'm mentioning it. The physical sound of my voice has altered your perception. By conjuring that image in your mind, I cast a genuine spell. To Moore, that's all magic is. Magic.
Okay, that's pretty sick. That's a cool approach to art and just everything.
Bridges the divide between the material and the immaterial. Art, language, symbols, these are the real wizard's wands. Per Moore, magic is intrinsically connected with art, language, and consciousness to the point where these four things almost become different aspects.
Like, I thought he was gonna have some witch talk ass ideas. This is just like, it's a beautiful way and a cool and mysticism induced way of looking at imagination and art
of the same phenomenon. This same principle is seen in the rabbit-duck illusion. At first glance, you see either a rabbit or a duck. Just because someone's mind initially interprets it as duck doesn't mean that meaning is fixed. All it takes is for someone to tell them it's also a rabbit, and all of a sudden, it changes right before their eyes. It's storytelling as spellcraft. Just as storytelling can be used to cast illusions, it can likewise dispel them. As an anarchist, Moore counts money among the more destructive illusions to ever distort mankind's collective conscious. When Miracle Man tasks
I mean, dude, I already knew he was an anarchist. One, because I know his background, obviously, but also because, like, I mean, dude, what did you think? Like, of course he's an anarchist. Look at him. Just the crust, dude. The absolute crust.
first things he does is abolish money, suddenly announcing, "Money is a promise to redeem the cash of every bearer for its worth in gold or merchandise. An empty promise. Should we all demand at once redemption of our coins, we learn such wealth does not exist. Money's imaginary, real if we believe in it. Come summer, money won't exist, but then it never did." This method of magically altering something by changing the way you think is most clearly seen in Promethea. A notable example happens when protagonist Sophie has
that is like literally ANCOM, like anarcho-communism, at the heart of anarcho-communism. Maybe a more mystical approach to it. There is obviously a more materialist reason for it, but my man loves drugs so much he tried to teach people what drugs taught him through art. Don't send me Watchmen in my P.O. box. I already have a fuckload of the copies.
a rematch with the Demon King Asmodeus. Initially, Sophie and co. are set on slaying Asmodee in anger, but it's only when they accept that so-called demons are just a part of human nature, the worst parts, that Asmodeus' appearance shifts to that of a human. He explains, "Approach us with fear, with hatred and revulsion, and we will be fearsome, hateful, and vile. Approach us humanely and with respect, and we will be human and respectable." For the magician, expectation creates.
Now think about Watchmen and try to find Alan Moore's self-insert. I always thought that it was Rorschach. But maybe I'm wrong. However you say his name. Nope, he's the Night Owl. No, he was cringe as fuck. Yeah, no, I literally thought that it was him. I originally, when I first read the comic books, I originally thought he was like an ANCAP. Like I thought he was like a libertarian. For the record, I was young, and then I found out that he was like a lefty anarchist. But it just stuck with me. I know Rorschach is a reactionary chud. I know. Chat, of course I know. It's crazy because the TV series is completely pro-police. The Watchmen TV series is so weird. It's not. I wouldn't say it's pro. I thought it was too. I originally thought it was as well. Like, it literally starts off as like propaganda to the max, and you're like, what the fuck? It's worth. I like it. It's not like, I don't know if it's, I don't think it stays true to the Watchmen idea, but it's definitely not pro-police. I thought it was too, but if you only watched the first episode, you thought it was pro-police. It's not. Don't spoil it, but it's good.
Perspective.
It's good.
Even
I
Dr.
like
Manhattan is a magician in this sense. He externally appears as an ageless aquamarine Adonis with alopecia solely because this is how he internally perceives himself. So if a sufficiently compelling story can magically change our perception of a single phenomenon, what happens if we tell a story that tries to account for all the phenomena in existence? Moore does exactly that in Promethea, telling a story about everything as a spell to change our perceptions about everything. Of course, we can never quite wrap our heads around the infinite expanse of all spacetime, but we don't need to. One of Hermeticism's most famous principles is something called macrocosm and microcosm. Expressed in the maxim, as above, so below, this principle presumes that every level of reality reflects every other, like an infinite fractal, or like how everything wrong with YouTube can be distilled down to Logan Paul, and all the worst things about Logan Paul are echoed throughout YouTube's other channels. Being able to understand one part of the pattern allows you to better understand the whole, and in turn, move from lower levels to higher levels. With Promethea, the entire structure of the series is deliberately based upon a specific structure that repeats at macrocosmic and microcosmic levels. from entirety of existence to each individual soul, the Kabbalah's Tree of Life. For more, the Tree of Life is the roadmap to all reality, including our inner lives. At the bottom rung is mere perception, seeing the rabbit or duck. Above that is imagination, the ability to make mental models of things not directly apprehended with our senses. Above that is our capacity for art and language, the ability to tie ideas to sounds, symbols, pictures, and stories. And above that, our capacity for emotion and reason, respectively. At the macroscopic level, the physical universe is the basis sphere of the world's soul. Above that is everyone's collective unconscious, and at the very top of the tree is...
With someone with ADHD, I don't get how you can pay attention to all this. Can you? No. I'm just like... I'm literally... I'm not. I can't. It's like very hard. I'm gonna be honest with you. I just... It's way too dense. And it's also way too dank at the same time. Don't feel bad about yourself if you don't understand what the fuck's going on.
Is what early Hermeticists called the All, the One God. That's why Promethea is 32 issues long, corresponding to the 10 spheres.
You can tell the chat is leftist because everybody's so lost on hard concepts. Yeah, dude, leftism is about easy concepts. Like believing the world is built by good people and bad people who have good fifis and bad fifis, and they do bad things, and because they're bad, you know, like black people, they're doing bad things because they're bad. Oh, don't call me racist if that's my worldview, okay? You know, everybody always knows, man. The real hard stuff you learn from fucking Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder. You know what I mean?
And 22 paths of the Tree of Life added together. The story itself ends at issue 31, so he wrote a 32nd issue, itself 32 pages, with each page expounding upon one of the paths. Thus, the issue was a deliberate microcosm of the series as a whole, and the series a macrocosm of the issue, or as above, so below. Another Hermetic principle used by Moore is solve et coagula, or separate and combine. Basically breaking a thing down into its component parts to better understand how the whole fits together. Dr. Manhattan's arc in Watchmen is all about him learning solve et coagula. When we first meet him, he expresses an understanding of the first half, separate, better than anyone else. He's detached from humanity because he's mentally broken humans down into their base components, not unlike his father did with watches. His breakthrough on Mars is learning not merely to break humans down into abstract arrangements of atoms.
In my opinion, the existence of life is a highly overrated phenomenon.
But rather to conceptually recombine and perceive them as holistic four-dimensional objects. Solve et coagula is seen even more clearly in the 6th issue of Promethea. Sophie finds herself inside humanity's collective imagination and faces off with writer Marto Neptura, the pseudonym for a writer of the Promethea character. As a writer, Neptura's power over the land of fiction is nearly absolute. Sophie is only able to defeat him by understanding that Neptura was the collective pen name of various novelists cut down to his separate unique styles. So if a compelling story can change one's view of the world, what happens when a story is so complete a model of the world that it changes the perception of our entire species? For more, when everyone's way of viewing the world one way ends, the world ends. In Promethea, this is exactly the task that Sophie is given. Margaret, one of the Prometheas before Sophie, explains humans are amphibious. That means they live in two worlds at once, matter and mind. Promethea makes people more aware of the vast immaterial realm, maybe tempts them to explore it. Imagine if too many people followed where she led. It would be like the Great Devonian Leap from sea to land, humanity slithering up the beach from one element into another, from matter to mind. Moore believes that it was through a similar leap from matter to mind that our ideas about the world began in the first place. Representation allows for the origination of verbal language, with this sound or this collection of marks somehow also standing for that buffalo over there. Language is the...
One of you guys sent me a mini fridge, like, a while ago, and my mom was like, you should use it. It's like when you're trying to argue with Ben Shapiro, you can't even comprehend what Ben's trying to say. Get fuck liberal. I can't. I really can't. I can't understand it. I wanna ground us back to the world, the real world, where the top of the hour means a 60-second ad break is coming.
The necessary precursor of our apparently unique form of consciousness, humanity's first purposeful engagement with the phenomena and possibilities of consciousness. Out of this engagement sprang, almost full-blown, the entirety of human culture: writing, painting, song, music, theater, science, medicine, and even politics. And so, in the same way that this idea of the world began,
everything came. Was that the Big Bang? Give me a second. Yes, that's how it all came into being. And look, it's still going on. It's always still going on space-time, the beginning, the end, all the time, all at once.
It also ends. In the series' penultimate issues, Sophie succeeds in bringing about the apocalypse by explaining to everyone the same hermetic principles we've been talking about. Everyone now perceives the immaterial and the material worlds as equally real. But while Promethea was bringing about the world's end within the comics, Moore was contemplating how our world will end in a similar fashion. In the 12th issue, Moore uses the tarot to trace the history of the world from the initial quantum vacuum and God big banging the universe into existence, all the way to the coming leap to expanded consciousness. Moore places his own doomsday clock quite close to midnight, like his character Rorschach carrying a sign that says, "The end is nigh." How near? Writing that issue in 1999, Moore predicted the end of the world as we know it would occur in 2017, when the
Yeah. Well, I guess he was right, dude. Trump became president.
sum total of our knowledge would double at a rate of every half second. With so much new knowledge coming so quickly, our old ways of understanding the world wouldn't be able to keep up, and we'd naturally need new ways of understanding the new world. Those of you alive back in 2017 may recall that the world did not, in fact, come to an end. But before the year came and went, Moore himself tried, like his character Promethea, to herald the apocalypse at the hour he'd appointed.
Yo, he does look like the type of dude who would be running around saying the world's about to end.
In September of 2016, on the eve of his prophesized world's end, Moore released his magnum opus, Jerusalem. If Promethea was a spell he cast to magically change the minds of individual readers, Jerusalem was the ritual he performed to bring about worldwide revelation. As Moore himself attests, rather than performing a ritual to produce a successful book, the book itself is the 10-year ritual working that is intended to have a certain, hopefully beneficial, effect upon the consciousness of its readership. Jerusalem seems to me to be my most sophisticated and complex magical working thus far, and certainly the most ambitious in its aims. Ambitious in its aims is an understatement. Moore writes in such a way that the reader experiences the higher states of consciousness that the narrative is at the same moment describing. Not dissimilar to the way the heptapod's language in Arrival profoundly affects Lois Lane's perception of time. This is especially evident in a chapter told from the perspective of Lucia Joyce during her confinement in an asylum. It employs the same linguistic style found in her father's novel Finnegan's Wake, abounding in puns, portmanteaus, and neologisms in order to replicate Lucia's condition. Moore explores how those exhibiting certain forms of insanity might be closer to perceiving external reality than
Jesus fucking Christ, dude. This guy needs to go on Joe Rogan. They need to do like ayahuasca together.
those who are deemed, quote,
I mean, this is like Joe Rogan shit for anarchists and lefties, for the record.
sane. In Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan perceives every moment of his life simultaneously, a far different perception than, quote, sane individuals. But Moore, like Einstein, regards time as a stubbornly persistent illusion. So the fact that Manhattan is not taken in by this delusion of time makes him more sane, not less. It's we who are deficient for perceiving only the now, rather than being able to gaze upon the past, present, and future like we might a three-dimensional plane. In order to get us in the habit of perceiving the dimensions which we might not initially perceive, Moore employs solve et coagula to language itself, taking apart the written word into its base components, separating phonetics, how vocalized words sound, from graphetics, how written words appear. Moore writes dialogue as a series of words that look like gibberish, but when read phonetically, make sense. More forces the reader to read multiple layers of meaning in every word. For example, if you read this aloud, you get the phonetic dimension. Her father in his time maintains that we are in a universe composed of 4 dimensions, only 3 of which are naturally visible. This phonetic dimension is only one side of the text, and if it's the only part we observe, we miss out on its other possible meanings. The gibberish is full of double entendre, like spelling dimension in a way that resembles dementia, or universe in a way that resembles loony.
Oh my fucking god, bro. Stop. Okay, I wish I didn't watch this. I literally wish I did not watch this. I just like respect him less now, kind of. This is like being a weeb for insanity.
Moore teaches us to read with more dimensions than we normally perceive in a text about how the universe has more dimensions than we normally
Literally too deep for chat. Okay.
perceive. It's explanation and example at the same time, magically changing how our mind models the world by changing the language with which our minds construct that model. Of course, even if everyone in the whole world did read Jerusalem and have their minds expanded by more, it doesn't necessarily follow that we'd make the great leap from the murky waters of matter to the solid land of ideas and imagination. While Moore may not have managed to bring about his revelation in 2017, given his status as the most influential writer in the history of comics, his literary efforts are likely to remain influential for centuries. So is magic real? If Moore is right, it's at least as real as our imagination. This is Promethea's revelation that ends the world, speaking not to any of the characters in the comic, but to you, the reader. I'm an idea, but I'm a real idea. I'm the idea of human imagination, which, when you think about it, is the only thing we can really be certain isn't imaginary. See, I'm imagination. I'm real, and I'm the best friend you ever had. Who do you think got you all this cool stuff? The clothes you're wearing, the room, the house, the city that you're in. Everything in it started out in the human imagination. Your lives, your personalities, your whole world. All invented, all made up. And there's nothing.
Just say Alan Moore used to shift to Hogwarts and move on, dude, okay? I mean, after all, he was a fucking witch talk guy. He is literally shifting, dude. But I guess in his case, it does make sense because he's not like jumping onto pre-existing IP and like literally creating this reality that he had in his mind that now you can shift to. So he's the actual shifter, just like J.K. Rowling, I hate to admit this, would be the real shifter. And then everyone else is just like, you know, stealing that shit. And they're not real shifters. I already ran the ad break, chat.
Here, but a funny little twist of amino acids playing a marvelous game of pretend. To that list of cool stuff that imagination has given us, we can certainly add the highly imaginative works of Alan Moore. Thanks for going down this weird and wacky rabbit hole with us.
This was probably the worst Wisecrack video I've ever watched. And only because, like, usually when I watch Wisecrack videos, I develop a newfound appreciation for the you know, brilliance of the writer or the author or the artist. But in this one, I'm like, oh,